Hey guys, welcome to the Supergrowth podcast. We're speaking to Corey Haines today, and this one's going to be massive. So he's going to break down the entire software as a service segment for us, and you guys are going to love it. Anyone in the software as a service space, who's looking at growing revenue, looking at pricing, looking at how to reduce churn, looking at product market fit. He's got all of this and more. I'm so excited to bring Corey Haines, head of growth at Baremetrics, right to you. Let's go.
Perfect. So let's start off with your story, man. This is interesting. You have a very fancy title. You have a title that a lot of people would like to have, but I'm not sure if they can deliver on. So tell us how you got there. How you got that title?
Yeah, great question. So I'd spent about 2 years at another startup named Cordial, and basically I started as an intern, and then as the first full-time marketing hire after they raised their Series A and had some money for salaries and growth and hiring. And then basically just kind of like hopped around doing whatever was necessary. I started more on like the demand generation side of things, and then went more on the event and kind of experiential marketing side of things once we got really into like conferences and event marketing, and then went more into like the content marketing side of things. And so SEO, webinars, white papers, downloadables. So I kind of had like a very full breadth all along the way. I was working with our SDRs really closely on their outreach campaigns, and sort of more like product marketing side of things of, handling objections, creating materials, being able to tell the story really well. And all along the way, through college, through my job at Cordial, I had been a huge fan and follower of Josh Pickford, the founder of Baremetrics. So I'd read, every single blog post, listened to every single podcast, just followed him really closely. I was very like invested in the journey of the open startups. And so I saw that he was kind of putting out some feelers for maybe hiring someone in more of like a business role, like marketing sales role in about June. I thought, okay, that's interesting. They might, he might be hiring someone kind of soon, because I knew that he wasn't really like a traditional marketing sales kind of guy anyways. Like he was very more like a maker and creator and product focused person. So I had a hunch that maybe he wanted to kind of get that off of his shoulders. And then in September, he put the job out, or the job posting out, and I just thought, what the heck, why not? I'll apply. And actually, I didn't even consider. I was really happy at my other job, and I didn't even consider applying at first.
Right.
I actually sent them this really long email about like, hey, I don't think I'm going to be interested in applying, but I just want to send over some thoughts for you. And it was like way too long. And I was like, just at the end, like, take it or leave it basically, but just, I wanted to be able to support you guys, whoever you guys do hire. And he
Right.
was like, oh, are you sure you don't want to apply? And I was like, oh, what the heck? I guess I will. So I
Right.
applied, and then 2 months later, ended up landing the job. So consider
Nice.
myself very lucky. But it's just, right timing, right advice, and right opportunity.
Nice. So I think that's just like I think you just went for the growth side of things there, where you said, okay, you know what, let's just shoot that email out, and then you think the copy skills got tested there a little bit.
Oh,
So like,
definitely. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, especially keeping his attention for so long. It was a pretty
yeah.
lengthy email.
They probably figured that the product guy is actually going to read it all the way
Right,
through.
right. He's
He's
gonna
probably
dissect it line by line.
he was making notes on that. All right,
Yeah.
good. That's really nice. So immediately brings me to something which is what do you do, man? Like, what is the head of growth like for something like Baremetrics? Because you have access to like a lot of data there. You have like access to a lot of stuff, so you know how other
Hmm.
companies are growing, what are they doing, etc. But what's it like to sort of, let's say, what do you do? What does your role look like?
Yeah, as far as responsibility goes, it's sort of mainly a blend between marketing and sales. I also have like a very retention focused side of things as well. It's not necessarily like customer support or customer success, but it's just about like how are we retaining, upgrading, expanding customer accounts,
Mm.
and upselling in some ways as well. And so, but as far as like what's my day to day look like, it's a lot of email, a lot of just going back and forth with customers, with people chatting in through the website.
Right,
I do some writing here and there. I'll write some blog posts. I go on podcasts like this. I do webinars,
right.
more on kind of the marketing side of things. And then like Monday, Wednesday, Friday are kind of my call days. And so that's when I have demos with customers,
Mm.
or with trialing users. I also do like a lot of kind of free consultation with customers or people interested in Baremetrics. So I'll do things like a a free landing page review or a pricing review or onboarding review, just to help them, sit down with them for 45 minutes and just kind of brainstorm and be a second pair of eyes. Because, like you said, I've kind of had my eyes on so many different startups and seeing what works and what doesn't and all the metrics in between. Um, so to answer your question, as a head of growth, it's sort of a jargony word. It means a lot of different things to different people.
Right.
In the kind of Silicon Valley traditional sense of the word, it's more like a growth. Traditionally, it's more like a growth hacking kind of role of like basically you're just a conversion rate optimizer. You're just basically focused on kind of like one part of the funnel and optimizing that as much as you can. For me, growth basically just means marketing and sales. So
Right.
not any growth hacks, not very much like conversion rate optimization. Although of course that's a part of the job, but it's very broad. It kind of it spans the full funnel of the customer, if you will.
Right. Okay. So that's really so that's interesting. Looking at growth from different sides, because there you also have people who look at let's say growth from point of view of growing the customer, like let's say the business of the customer itself. So that's another space, but that's mainly I think from the agency side. Good. And I'm going to put you on the spot here, which is with things people in your space disagree with you about. This is something which is
Ooh.
controversial or not. I don't know where this is going, but you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if probably not the only one, but something I've been thinking about that I think that there's a lot of like you always have to be wary of kind of like dogmatic advice or very like binary black and white advice. And I think for a long time, everyone has kind of always accepted the convention of always grandfather customers in pricing.
Right.
And so grandfathering is traditionally a practice where if you have customers early on, or if you have customers kind of at a certain price, and then you change that price or you increase that price, then you would quote unquote grandfather them to be able to keep that old price that they had and not be affected by the new price. Um, the only thing, and this can also include, free customers. Like some people, when they're first starting up, they'll give accounts for free just for advice and feedback and kind of help building the product. Um, but the thing that happens though is that when you get 2, 3, 4, in some cases 10 years down the road, you might have these customers who are paying a fraction of the price, or they're paying a price that really doesn't make sense or isn't aligned with the value that they're getting out of the product.
Right.
They love it, but they're kind of stealing a little bit, and so I don't know if grandfathering is always the best way to go, especially lifetime grandfathering. I'll say right off the bat, I mean, I don't think that free accounts for anyone should be allowed. I don't think that it's any sort of validation to give something away for free and then call them a customer.
Right.
The only true form of validation is if someone is paying you money. And so I really personally don't like it. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I personally really don't like the idea of giving away free accounts, just because, again, it's not you're not aligned with with the customer's incentive. If they're not paying you money and they're using it for free, they could also just go easily use something else or a competing product
Right.
and just say, oh, well, it's for free. We're not losing anything anyways. Let's just go switch off, right? Or they might not just be that invested anyways, because again, it's not costing them anything. They don't have that much skin in the game. Um, on the grandfathering side of things, a couple of suggestions that I like to just kind of throw out for people to consider instead of, giving a lifetime grandfathering, where you lock them in at the super low rate forever, is to give a 1 or 2 year grandfathering period. So give them a really extended long time where you say, hey, we're making this price change. You're going to see this in, maybe 3 months where the prices are going to double, let's say, for example. But just for you guys, and since you've been with us for a while, we're going to delay that for a year. And also, in maybe 11 months down the line, you can switch to annual billing and lock it in for another year, and that way you won't be affected. But eventually still, and then maybe it's like, hey, once they get to that and they're like, hey, can you work something out for us, you can give them another 15% discount for life, or you can give a 20% discount for a year, maybe just kind of ease them into it a little bit more. But I always like to gradually transition into everyone being on the same plans, on the same pricing. Whether that takes 2 or 3 years, that's fine with me, just as long as there's a path upwards, because you don't want to leave a lot of money on the table. And what a lot of people don't think about too is the lifetime value of a customer, because after 2 or 3 years, the price change could be a difference of thousands of dollars over the lifetime of that customer. And then when you have 100 customers, 1,000 customers, 10,000 customers, that ends up being tons and tons and tons of money left on the table, which again is just unnecessary.
Hmm. Right. I think that this is like started off with the grandfathering side, and I think that immediately brings me to you. You actually brought up a point on the free tier side of things, or or a free plan. Um, but then there's another argument that's going around, and which is something that I want to understand your philosophy around. This is, I think, a lot of this comes down to how you want to run the business, because a lot of advice that you get in general, apart from the pricing model, is you get them free, and then they sign up, and then you make it difficult for them to leave. And this is like the migration conversation that keeps on happening internally, and which is like, I keep on listening to all of these different people, and they, I don't know. So I'm personally, like, let's say, as a user of a product, not necessarily happy with that. But looking at it from the other side of the story, people talk about that. What's your philosophy about, I don't know, making it difficult for people to migrate, making it easy for them to migrate? Because then that becomes a question where they're going to stick around, if it's really difficult or it's costly, etc., to move from you. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to clarify something really quickly. I'm not against free plans. I'm against giving free accounts on a pay plan. Because like what you'll see, maybe you charge $50 a month for your product, but you're trying to get your first early users and early adopters, and so you say, hey, I'm looking for people who I'll give them a free account forever, just in exchange for feedback and for helping them with
Right.
product. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
against that. If you have a free plan, if you have a freemium product,
Mm.
freemium is a great lead gen strategy. Again, they're not customers because they're not paying you money; they're users. But it's a fantastic way to generate those leads, and then hopefully, eventually, or actually not eventually. I mean, hopefully within a year. Actually, it's kind of like a good benchmark. Upgrade them into a paid account.
Right.
Now, on the side of retention and churn, and making it hard for someone to leave or migrate, I think it's sort of I don't know. You can go either way. You'll see, for example, on a lot of the enterprise side of things, with 6-7 figure annual contracts, that they make it very hard to leave. Like they are
Mm.
going to try to ingrain you as much as possible. They're going to set up all sorts of custom integrations. They're going to do some custom work for you. They're going to do some services for you.
Right.
They're going to ask for a 90-day notice. And then if you cut early, then you have to pay a fee, and you have to, they'll lock you in on a 1, 2, or 3 year contract. And I think for them that makes sense because it's such a huge operation and there's so much money tied up to it that you need to be able to know when it's happening, and you need to be able to counteract it, try to save it. And so as long as you're not like bugging people,
Mm.
as long you can put someone through a couple of hoops for the sake of both of you, right? You don't want to just be able to switch something off that costs you $100,000 a year and just say, okay, we're switching over to this guy now.
Mm.
It doesn't really make any sense for either side,
Right.
because of all the work and investment that goes into it. Now that said, on the other side of things, for maybe like very low tier products that are, or maybe low average revenue per user products in the maybe like single digits, right? I don't think that there should be any friction there because that's more probably a consumer or kind of prosumer, quote unquote, product, maybe a very kind of light B2B product. And in that case, you really just you can't risk the customer support or the bad reputation you might get from angry people, with pitchforks on Twitter saying, how dare they make it hard for me to cancel. And I had to email someone just to cancel my account, but there's a lot of gray area in between. And so I think that for a lot of B2B SaaS products, especially, probably in like the $30 to $50 a month and up range,
Mm.
there's some things you can do to make it not necessarily harder to cancel, but this just makes someone think about it more, and that gives you an opportunity to save it. So you can, instead of just putting like a big red button up in the corner, right, and just saying cancel my account and making it like very obvious,
Right.
you can kind of put it deep in the settings, right, maybe in the billing panel, and then when they click cancel, maybe first you can show an option of like, are you sure you want to cancel? And then if you click yes, then you can maybe pull up a little pop-up like we do with one of our products, actually, is cancellation insights. And so essentially we can serve a form that asks someone why they're canceling. So they can leave some feedback about, they can choose a reason, add in some additional context there in the text box, and then click cancel, and then it will go through, right? So you don't want to make it hard or easy. There's a lot of gray area in between, but I think especially like the higher up you go and the more money
Mm.
that you charge, the more notice you want to have and the more opportunities you want to have to save them.
Right. Okay. And I think that sort of, let's say, um, speaks about your philosophy anyway. You're pretty neutral about it. You don't necessarily want to be manipulative about it, but you also like, let's have the options out there, but also not, let's say, be on an unfair standing, when it comes to
Right.
let's say, people taking advantage of, because that also happens because you don't know the intent of the customers, and you have all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
people out there.
Yeah.
Completely get that. Yeah, absolutely. So I
Yeah.
think taking care of yourself is what you're looking at. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say too, especially for early stage startups, within the first year or maybe even 2 years of a startup, I would actually advise against putting a cancel button in the settings. I
Right.
would put maybe you could put like a cancel my account button or maybe like a request a cancellation.
Mm,
But I would want to personally talk to every single customer that wants to cancel. You can say, that's totally fine, but would you mind if I ask you a couple questions before I
mm,
do and process it? Because that feedback is critical, especially in the early days, because they're still validating the idea, right? And especially for the early customers, and if you're giving them a good deal, right, and they're giving you lots of feedback, you want to understand what are those gaps I need to fill in order to make
mm.
a sustainable, profitable business. So you can't afford to just let someone go without at least giving you some feedback about why they're canceling. That way you can go and prevent it in the future.
Which is sort of, let's say, immediately gets me to your customer research point. And you say that not a lot of people are talking about it. Tell me about customer research. What part of customer research do you think is getting missed out in the conversation?
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's just been in the last, I don't know, a couple of decades, maybe with like kind of this digital age that we're in now and online marketing, that it's just kind of like fallen out of vogue, and it's a little bit less like well accepted or popular to do. Maybe it's just not well practiced enough either. But customer research is a really foundational part
Mm,
of marketing and business and entrepreneurship that a lot of people are just kind of skipping over. Everyone has $1 million idea. They have their notebook full of ideas. Everyone watches Shark Tank. Everyone goes and thinks that they have a great idea without actually going. Well, the mistake is that they go and they make this great idea, that they go and make it, have it produced. If you're a software startup, you go learn how to code, or you go hire an agency, or you co-found with a technical kind of CTO role founder,
mm,
and you just go start and building it, right?
mm,
But how do you know if that idea is any good? How do you know if
mm,
people want it? How do you know if people are going to pay for it? Even if you did build something, how are you aligning your product with the market? This is where the whole conversation around product market fit comes in. And it's kind of like this jargony word that gets thrown around nowadays. But I'm not sure that anyone really knows what it means anymore.
mm.
When someone says product market fit, they could be talking about 100 different things. I think the original kind of spirit of the concept was to align the product that you're building with the market's needs. And so you choose a market, you get super specific, and you say, okay, we're going to build this product for this market. And then once we feel like we have, like basically once the product fits the market's needs,
Mm,
and we have low churn, we have good retention, then we can say that we have product market fit, and then we can go and scale this. We can, go hire out a growth team, a sales team, a marketing team, et cetera.
right.
Now, where that all gets lost is that there's not a lot of research being done to get to product market fit.
Mm,
And then even then, right, you can't ever stop doing customer research because you don't want to lose touch of the market's needs. So in my time at Baremetrics, I've kind of discovered through the hundreds of companies that I talked to about 10 to 20 a week. Normally a lot of new companies as well.
mm,
And I've kind of learned to bucket companies into two different categories. There's companies who do customer research, which are in the minority, and then there's companies who guess. And the companies who guess have wildly different metrics, have wildly different outcomes, have wildly
right.
different ideas about what's working. Usually, when someone's doing customer research and they're really in tune with their customers' needs, they're on the phone with customers, they're sending out
Mm,
surveys, they're looking online, they have a heartbeat on the customers. They know exactly what's going on. They just need help executing that.
right.
With companies who guess and companies who don't do customer research, um, they're kind of floundering, right? They see really high churn, but they're not sure why.
Mm,
They're acquiring tons of customers, but maybe tons of free users, right? But they can't get them to upgrade. They're just kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, and they don't really know what's working. And the magic of customer research is that for any problem in your business that you need to solve, you can just go ask your customers.
mm,
If you need to ask them in the right way, right? You need to kind of you don't want to introduce bias, or you don't want to ask leading questions. You want to get actual feedback, but your customers will give you the answer to basically everything you want to know about how to market your product, how to charge for it, what features to build, why they're leaving, right? How do we retain more customers? What are the features we can build to allow people to upgrade and expand in their account, and we can charge them more money? All that is in this whole kind of pool of customer research that we can go grab. And just it's not a very common practice. The
Mm.
product teams are very isolated, and they have their ideas for features. The marketing team has their ideas about what to write about, and which ads are working, and what resonates, and what message should we put on the market. The sales team is demoing a whole completely different version of the product, right? They're making it look very shiny, and uh,
Mm.
and their selling points are completely different than the value props that the customers want. Customer research aligns, again, the business and every person, every part of the business with the customer's needs. And once a customer sees that this is a product built for someone like me, it's a no-brainer, right? But without the customer research, it's very hard to make that alignment.
Right, and I think it's funny you say that, coming from the background that you're coming from in terms of, let's say, the industry that you're in, because it's so common. You see it across the world, you see it across agencies, you see it across, let's say, effective copywriting and conversion copy, and you see it around so many different things where um, companies just don't know, and what they end up doing is putting out a lot of bunch of stuff, and then again, like some things work, some things don't work, and they don't really know. So it's not, I don't think this is necessarily
Hmm.
common for, like, let's say, just software as a service. It's just like so common within the
Oh,
venture.
definitely.
Yeah, or like, but I think what a lot of these VC side of things, or let's say venture capital side of things, they've sort of now started to look at product market founder fit or product market team fit. That's
Hmm.
another sort of a hack that's come into the investing world, if you call it, because you really don't control product market fit. Really, you can have the founder combination there or the team combination there. And do you think, like, that's also coming down to the individual at the end of the day, where let's say certain people are just like good at listening and good at, let's say, or they have those skills, or they've developed those skills over the years, or they become much more patient and much more, let's say,
Hmm.
understanding of the fact that, okay, you know what, one tool is not going to solve a problem for me, one hack is not going to do this. We have to take everything in totality. You think let's say, uh, the way these people handle it, or the teams handle it, is also important here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are certain aptitudes that someone has that could make them more likely to kind of do customer research, or have it ingrained as a part of their workflow. I think people who are more like have a high EQ, are very emotionally intelligent, and are much more likely, or much more in tune, to empathize with someone. I mean, that's all customer research is. It's tell me about your problems. It's let it all out. This is a safe place. It's what do
Right.
you need? What are you looking for? Oh, interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Right. It's just getting into the mind of someone else. The other part of it too is just kind of the intuition and the data driven side of things. So there's just kind of this
Mm,
tension between you have the Steve Jobs, the customers don't know what they want. I'll tell them what they want.
mm,
And then you have the data driven side of things where it's like, let's just go out to the market, let's test, let's survey, and let's see what the customers want. There's a balance between there, right? I think that our job as marketers, as business people, as entrepreneurs, isn't necessarily to do one or the other. It's not, if you build exactly what a customer wants, it's going to be ugly, it's not going to function correctly, and it's not going to be the best thing out there. If
mm.
you just build what you want, it might be completely different than what the
Right.
customer wants, right? And there could be a complete mismatch. But in between, if you can understand what a customer wants
Mm,
and then build them something that or sorry, you don't want to build something that the customer wants. You want to build something that solves the customer's problems, right?
mm,
So customers will tell you what you want, but it's your job to interpret that into here's what how a product actually solves that, and here's the best way we can solve that, right? Because a customer would say, I want to be able to uh, I think a great example of this was Netflix. So
mm,
the product team over there, that kept hearing from customers, um, I just want to be able to skip ads, right? And so the customer, if they just listen to them, we're like, okay, we need to be able to skip all the ads, right? Well, then there goes all their ad revenue, right? There goes everything that they built out there. But
mm.
if they listened to that and said, okay, what if we made our ads more fun and more engaging, more entertaining? Or what if we just made them shorter and we got them more engaged, right? Maybe it's something better. Actually, I'm confusing this with Hulu. It's not Netflix, it's Hulu. Hulu does
Right.
commercials.
Mm,
Um, But again, it's just the ability to match what the customer needs with what you think will solve that problem.
Mm,
And definitely, there are some people that are much more likely to do that, right? You need people who have high aptitude for empathy, people who are very smart, who can interpret things, who can listen to someone, to what someone says, and read between the lines and really understand, okay, what is this person actually looking for?
mm.
What are they experiencing? And how can I turn this into a product that solves their problems?
Right. And I think that just brings me to I think people who, let's say, have a gap within that space or that skill set, how effective do you think, sort of tools, different kinds of, let's say, platforms play a role there to actually try and figure out what customers are doing? Because I think what
Mm.
also gets missed in the entire picture there is how do you actually go about doing your customer research besides just speaking to the customer? Because sometimes the customer is telling you something, but like you said, right, reading between the lines, you think tools are like there's an effective way of using these tools and a non-effective way of using these tools.
Yeah, there's definitely, and actually, I mean, tools aren't really a big part of customer research.
Mhm.
Um, I think that it's sort of commoditized. Like, there isn't one tool that's going to give you like an insane competitive advantage to be able to do customer research.
Except for Reddit.
Um,
Except for Reddit.
right. There's definitely some interesting things in Reddit.
Right.
Um, but you have tools like, so I kind of categorize customer research into three different like ways you can do it. One, you can do like face-to-face customer research, so that could be either in person, it could
Mm,
be on a video call, it could be on the phone. And in those three ways, right, there are definitely some tools that help, like without Zoom, right, without a really stable way to talk on the phone or to talk over video with someone, you wouldn't be able to do that, right? And so that tool definitely is very good for that, especially because you can record it, right, and go back
mm,
and look through it. You can transcribe it later. You can use tools like I think Rev.com, they do some great transcriptions really fast. The second way is through surveys,
mm,
right? And so then you can use a tool like Typeform, SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, some others, Jotform. There's all sorts of specialized form services out there. Again, sort of commoditized. There isn't one that's really going to give you a competitive advantage there. And then three is online research. So this is going through the online communities, Reddits or subreddits, Facebook groups, Slack groups, all sorts of like niche watering holes that people hang out in, and
mm.
you're just becoming a part of the community. You're lurking, right? You're going through it and you're looking for what are the people saying, what are they experiencing, what do they need help with, what are they frustrated about. And that way, you just need something to collect it, right? So, I really like Notion for all of my kind of like
Yep. It's big,
storage and organization,
very
project
slick.
management.
Yeah, very slick.
Yeah, it's very slick. You can create your own little workspace. So that's normally what I do is I'll just create a new page where I'm just kind of like copying and pasting in little like nuggets and insights that I find around the web, and then I'll link back to it. Right, that I have one place to go back and see. So again, I mean, I think the tools part of the conversation is just how can I do this job the best that I can. For example, maybe you want to wrap in some conditional logic into your survey. Well, I think
Mm.
Typeform is really great at that. So in that
Yeah, yeah.
case, I would go with something like Typeform. You might not be able to pull that off with another tool. I
Mm.
think SurveyMonkey does it too. But anyways, I think it's more about, are you asking the right questions? Are you doing it in the right medium? And are you facilitating the right conversations in the right places?
Right. And I think that that's sort of, let's say, from the customer's research side, I think you've just given, like, let's say, an open way of doing, let's say, what you do. And I think is as straightforward as, I think people don't spend a lot of time doing it. Like you mentioned, there's so much of good stuff around that. And I think also a lot of people don't understand how the entire pyramid is, of decision-making process for the customer. So, everyone's focused on the top 3%. There's a guy called, I think, Sabri Subi from King Kong, happened to sort of end up getting through his content. He's from Australia. And then he does a lot of inbound, and he's pretty aggressive on his copy and this and that. But generally, I'm like a very observant, let's say, a student of, all those funnels that these guys keep on creating. And so he talks about this, and then he talks about the 3% at the top, and everyone's just focused on trying to convert those guys. But the real sort of, let's say, the entire market around research, where customers actually researching about what they want to buy and educating themselves. And I think a lot of people are missing that. So, but I think Drift did a really good sort of, let's say, good job at that, where, they try to put out all this content on conversational marketing and this and that. And they've sort of done a good job of trying to educate the audience about, or owning that entire subject area around
Hmm.
it. So you think, how important do you think is actually educating the customer about what that sort of, let's say, problem is that they don't necessarily are aware of right now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways that that plays out. You know, if you're adrift and you're trying to, you know, quote unquote, create a category, then you need to do tons and tons and tons of education. You need to do tons and tons of basically just like training someone to think in this way and to I mean, really, like I said, create a category, create a new way of understanding a product. Same, I mean, HubSpot did the exact same thing with inbound marketing. I think I heard maybe it was Dharmesh Shah. He talked about like within 4 years, they spent like over $40 million on advertising just to push the whole kind of inbound marketing mantra
Yep.
to get people to understand it. So if you're really like doing like if you're starting from scratch with something and you're like creating your own new thing, I mean, yeah, it's going to take tons and tons of money and time, right? It's not going to happen in a few months or even a year. It might take a couple of years for it really to stick. Um, Now, in the other way, for maybe people who don't have to create a new category, but just need to be able to get people to understand that maybe there's a better way of doing things, right?
Mm.
Yeah, there's tons and tons of ways that you can get people to make that mind shift. I'm a big fan of the jobs to be done framework to really understand like what are the kind of levers that you can pull and also help understand kind of the way that people think about things. The jobs to be done framework really breaks it down to these four kind of stages. So there's the push of the situation. And so what was it about the situation that made them look for a new solution? And in that case, right, people might not be aware that they have a problem or that the way that they're doing things kind of sucks. So in that way, you want to say, hey, are you still using, I don't know, spreadsheets for this, right? There's a specialized software that does this and this and this for you. Never have to do X, Y, and Z. It'll make your life 10 times better. Or you can, you know, use copy like, don't you hate doing X, Y, and Z? Or don't you wish X, Y, and Z was better? Then the second part is the pull of the new solution, right? So what is it about the new solution that would make them want to try it? So once you've kind of agitated the pain and the problem, and you've gotten someone to see that they have something maybe that's not optimal, and they're like, yeah, why am I manually inputting everything every time? Why am I using a clunky spreadsheet for this thing? Then you can say, now you want to kind of rosy up and romanticize the new solution, right? So you can talk about how all the automations and all the features and how it's built just for people like you, and how uh, and how much easier people's lives are after using it. Then the third one is maybe the habits holding people back, right? And so there's kind of this old workflow, this old way of doing things that people are ingrained in, and that way, you know, people are going to be scared of, oh well, if I switch to this old thing and I stop using the spreadsheet, will I still be able to do X? Or what about when Y happens? Or how do we get the whole team on board with this to do Z? And in that case, you're just trying to get people to say it's okay. We'll migrate you for free. We'll give you training and onboarding materials. We'll train your team. We have weekly webinars. We have a help desk, right? Tons of product video training materials. And then the fourth one is just the anxieties of the new solution, right? So then, like, right when it comes down to the cusp of like making a switch and making a decision, people just want to know, is this going to work for me? And what guarantees do you have? And what if I don't like it, right? And how much does it cost? And is this really better than the old way of doing things? And in that case, you're basically just kind of objection handling in a lot of ways, right? So you're just trying to ease someone into it of, no, it's okay, you're making the right decision. The price is here, but we can make it work for you at this point. If you don't like it, you know, we have, or maybe it's, if you don't like it, we have a free trial, right? So you can get started for 14 days. Maybe there's a money back guarantee. Maybe there's a free onboarding. Maybe there's you know, again, there's all sorts of ways to kind of mitigate that. But it all just depends on your objective, right? At the beginning, if you're trying to create a category from scratch, yeah, you need to retrain people the way that people think about it and ingrate it into someone's mind. If you're just trying to agitate a problem and teach them a new way of doing something, I think that you can get away with some it's a lot easier, right? There's a lot more traditional ways of doing that, and it probably doesn't have to take months and years of spending millions of dollars in ads.
Right. And I think so. As soon as sort of, let's say you figure this one out, which is okay, you know what, this is how I'm going to position it. This is what my consumer wants. This is the kind of, let's say, problem we are looking at solving, or the benefits we're going to, let's say, provide. You think after that, and especially in a crowded market, or especially right now where you have let's say, new product discovery on businesses copying features from each other and effectively having, let's say, 3 or 4 options or 5 options within a particular space, you end up with like a trust deficit problem, or you end up with a problem where the customer really is, let's say, yes, you can solve the problem, but then I don't really trust you. So how important do you think is establishing that as part of this entire, let's say, the pricing, activation, I get the retention, I get the churn, but then how important do you think brand and creating trust around, about your company and, in general about the solution providing, how important is that?
Yeah, I think it's huge personally because especially in the age that we're in right now, where there's more software products than there ever have been in the world before,
Yep.
and there's 10 different options for any one thing that you want to solve for. There's 10 different form builders, CRMs, website build. Like there's just an endless supply of options to choose from,
Mm,
which can be very overwhelming for customers, right? Because how do they know which one is best,
right.
and what if they're missing out on these other features, and who can they trust, right? And I think really SaaS at a point is kind of commoditized in a lot of ways. At
Mm,
least the selection of it is, right, because there's so many different options, and you're seeing a lot of the prices being driven down. That's where we're seeing now the advent of freemium in a lot of ways. But all that to say, uh, the way that you can make yourself stand out is by going the extra mile, and is by
mm,
showing your face, and is by building a relationship, and is by showing them that you can trust them, that you're real people, and they're going to be there for them, not just as someone to help them get set up in their software, but to teach them and to be a friend to them and to be an expert for them, to advise them in a lot of ways, right? And so anything you can do in order to build a human to human relationship with someone, just to be a friend, to be a resource to them, yeah, it could be the difference. Absolutely.
right. Nice. So I think you quickly mentioned, options get overwhelming for the customer, and I think the guys who are, let's say, setting up or running SaaS ventures also are customers at the end of the day, or human beings at the end of the day, which also sort of, let's say, they also get overwhelmed. And I think all of us get overwhelmed by this entire tool selection problem, even for deciding things like whether I should go for Baremetrics or some other tool, etc. You think everyone's spending too much time on that, like, generally, and we were discussing this earlier as well, the tool selection, the tool hopping, let's try this
Mm.
one out and then that one out, then you start migrating from one to the other. You think a lot of time is getting spent by a lot of people, and a lot of opportunity being wasted, a lot of time being wasted on trying to just get that one right tool, rather than actually making it
Mm.
work with what they have.
I don't know. I think for the customer and from the end user, people spend tons and tons of time
Mm,
evaluating, trying, tool hopping, going to see what works for them. I don't think that the tools, the software products, the companies do a well enough job in educating someone about why they should choose them.
mm,
A lot of it comes down to positioning, and if that's what you're asking, then absolutely not. No one spends enough time positioning. Not even me. Not even us.
right.
It's by far the most important job of marketing, and
Mm,
is the hardest job of marketing.
mm,
It's very difficult to execute well. When you do, though, I mean, it's killer. It's an ace in the hole when you can super crystal clear describe to someone why you should choose you over someone else. I mean, then uh, it just clicks with someone, right? The customers understand it immediately, and then they don't even consider the other things, right? Um, Now, with that said, as a marketer, I've used tons and tons of tools. I think there are more tools for marketers than there are any other kind of role or job or type of business person. But uh, I think a lot of it comes down to, yeah, educating, positioning. So when I first started doing a lot of content marketing, I basically I was kind of thrown into the role because my previous boss had just left, and that was kind of under his wheelhouse.
mm,
And so I came in there like, okay, well, how would you feel about taking up our content marketing strategy? And he hadn't done very much with it yet. He was still kind of in the early stages. Um, and so he was using Moz,
mm,
and so I went into Moz, kind of fooled around a little bit, and I was like, all right, I don't really know what I'm doing. I need to go learn, right? And so then I just happened to stumble upon Ahrefs,
mm,
who had just come out with a new course called Blogging for Business, and it was literally the perfect storm of timing because they had just put it out, and they just launched it for free too. So I was like, perfect. This will teach me everything I need to know about content marketing, SEO, and even how to use their tool as well. So I took the course. It was about, I don't know, a few hours long,
mm,
very well produced. It's an amazing course, by the way. I'm lucky that I got it for free. And in the course of doing that course, I felt very kind of empowered, educated, learned everything I need to know. And then I went back to Moz to go try to do and implement all those things. And then I realized that I couldn't because they had taught me everything using Ahrefs.
right.
So
Mm,
I was like, okay, well, I could learn, like I could relearn how to do all these things in Moz, or I could just go switch to Ahrefs. So that's what I
mm,
did. I just switched to Ahrefs. And now, personally, after using it, I understand. I think they do a fantastic job of positioning themselves because one, I like their interface a lot better, but also they have the largest set of data. They have a web crawler that even rivals Google's.
Mm.
Very updated set of backlinks and data around all the different articles and content out there on the web. They have a lot of fantastic tools, and they teach you again, like, hey, when you want to figure out what keywords your competitors rank for, here's how you do that, and then here's how you do that in Ahrefs. I would have no idea how to do that in Moz, right?
Right.
And so I tool hopped, but it was because the company positioned themselves, they
Mm.
educated, and they
Mm.
went through the time of teaching me, right, and training me. Here's the process for SEO and content marketing, and
Mm.
then here's the tool you use for that process, and then we're going to make you the type of person who can use that process and that tool to get the outcome you want for your business.
Mm. Yeah, I think it just circles around back to, like you said, the education piece and like helping out the person who's your customer at the end of the day. And
Hmm.
I think they for sure have spent a lot of time speaking to their customers, understanding what the problem is, because I'm sure this came out as an insight and like a lot of stuff. For sure, I think a lot of people can use that as and now it's not very tough to do as well. You have all these sort of platforms that allow you to quickly put a course together, and sort of, let's say, introduce your audience or your customers to whatever problem they're trying to solve through your tool. So yeah, that's a
Hmm.
very nice, I think, a way of sort of, let's say, nice, I say, tactic or a let's say, hack that they can use. That's pretty cool, and then immediately brings me to pricing, because that's a sensitive one. A lot of people generally, let's say, it's, I don't know if it's a science, I don't know if it's an art, I don't know what it is. Yeah.
Right.
Help me out here. So how can you play around pricing, for when it comes to software as a service, and like what kind of model do you guys use, or what do you think is the right kind of way of approaching it?
Yeah, pricing is hard. I mean, it's probably like the most uh, sparsely I don't know if like again, I think pricing and customer research are definitely two of the hardest and also like least practiced part of a business usually.
Mm.
Especially for SaaS. I think the worst thing again you want to do is like just default to something. So just defaulting to what your competitors do, or just defaulting to what you think is right. Defaulting to maybe what someone would just suggest offhand, right? Um, there's a lot of different components. I think the real challenge with software and SaaS pricing, especially, is that there's basically an almost unlimited number of ways to price a SaaS product, right? Because there's just it's software, right? You can make it do whatever you want. You can charge however you want it to.
Mm.
Also, the cost really has nothing to do with the price of a SaaS because it costs you almost nothing, right? It costs you the salary for someone to build it, and then it costs you a very minimal amount for any sort of like hosting, and then maybe a recurring charge for other integrations or services that you use with it. But that's not aligned with the value that someone gets out of the product. Also, I mean, the recurring nature of SaaS means that you're not charging one time upfront, you're
Mm.
charging over time, right? And so if you're charging, let's say, $10 a month, and then someone cancels within 3 months, well, they basically got a 70% discount on the product, or a
Mm.
90% discount on the product if you want them to stick around for 2 years, let's just say, for example. Um, so you have to account for all these different things here. Now, with that said, I think some of the major like categories for pricing and like pricing models is you'll usually see like flat rate pricing, you'll see user based pricing, you'll see feature based pricing, and then you'll see like a hybrid of all these other things in between. There's a few others as well I won't get into. Um, but you just need to find what aligns with the value that someone gets out of your price, out of your product, and that's usually called like a value metric, or it's some kind of key anchor you can position your pricing around. Maybe it's the number of users, maybe it's the number of devices, maybe it's the number of messages sent, et cetera. And it can be all sorts of other things as well. But you want to have one key anchor or value metric, and then just choose the pricing model that fits best. And I think the key there too is just to think ahead of time. Like you don't want to just put a price on something and just call it a day, right? You need to test it. You need to evaluate it. You need to your product and your business is constantly going to be evolving, and your pricing is going to be as well. And so,
Mm.
how do you create a path to expansion revenue? How do you make it easy for someone to upgrade from the lowest tier to the highest tier? How do you clearly communicate why someone should go with one pricing tier against another pricing tier? All sorts of ways in there. But I think that the key there is just not to default to it, to use a lot of customer research as well. There's some other testing and pricing methods you can use to find that out. but don't just pick something and then forget about it in 2 years, right? It's really a constant thing you have to be evaluating.
And you think a lot of people, I mean, I know a lot of people start off with competition, sort of, I call it the competition pricing bias in general. Is the easiest thing to do is just go and search for a bunch of other ventures within the space. And then sort of, let's say, you know what, the value we're providing is better, or UX is better, UI is better, etc. And then just be like, you know what, let's just add another $2 on top of that and be like, okay, well, you know what, this is good. Let's go with it. You think that happens quite a bit, and then people don't correct it? That's something that they don't revisit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of pricing out there that's just no one wants to challenge it because it's a scary thing to kind of go and change and test. For example, I got the chance to talk to Riley Chase, who's a software founder of a product called Hostify, and he kind of just slapped a price on something, created a couple tiers based on the cost for the service they would run to in order to do his product. Basically, I'm oversimplifying here, but the first tier was for up to 125 devices. Now, he heard a lot of customers saying both that it was too expensive and that it was too cheap. And so he mapped out how many devices are my customers actually using. And it turned out that about 80% of his customers weren't using any more than 40 devices.
Right.
So he was like, oh, geez, well, of course, they think that it's expensive because they're not even using half as much as they're allotted to for that pricing tier. So basically, he shifted everything down to the left, and then he made a lot more room up on the other side of the spectrum for more devices. And now he has a much better pricing tiers where I think it's like, and I think it's like 1, and then it's like 1 to 5, and then it's like 5 to 20, and then it's like 20 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 250, 250 to 500. And he has customers in all those tiers that are kind of evenly distributed now. So you want to, again, just plot it out. Don't just pick a price based on cost, because again, it has nothing to do with it. You really want to align it with the value customers are getting, and the value being, right, what is that anchor point, right? Don't just pick something randomly. You have to figure out what is the value. How many devices is it? How many emails is it? How many integrations is it, right? You just have to go figure that out.
That, which basically means that, let's say someone like me is just screwing it up. Let's say, someone like me is being like, listen, I just went in with, I went in, picked a price, and now I come to Corey and I'm like, listen, Corey, what's a safe way of figuring this one out from here, right? So we have a price out there, right? We have existing customers paying for it, which is, of course, circling back to your earlier point around how do you do it safely? What do you do from that point on?
In other words, how do you test it?
Yep.
Or how do you figure out what to charge?
Yep.
Really simple.
Sorry, I'm saying what's a safe way of conducting that exercise in a live business? Where you don't want to screw up your existing client base, and you also want to make sure that you're rolling it out in a good fashion.
Yeah. So 3 things to kind of figure out what the changes are that you want to make. This is a very simplified version, but you can ask 3 questions. What's an acceptable price? What's an expensive price? And then what's a too expensive price? What you'll find actually is that the expensive price is probably more around where you should be charging. Acceptable is usually going to be too low. And then too expensive is going to kind of give you the ceiling where you know that people, this is going to be way too expensive, right? That way, we could probably never charge more than this, at least not right now. And then secondly, you want to ask your customers to rank the features in order of importance. So this gives you a good idea of who values what, which features are most valuable or most important. That way, maybe you can distribute them into different tiers, or if you notice certain types of businesses using certain features and then other types of businesses using other features, maybe you can create different kind of persona-based tiers as well. And once you have that figured out, as far as like rolling it out, I would say test it with a small number of customers first. So maybe 5 to 10% of your customer base, and then once that goes smoothly, then roll it out to the rest of the customer base. But you never just want to cold, roll a new pricing out to your entire customer base without testing it beforehand with a smaller subset.
Yeah, I think it's fair advice, and I think it generally just being careful about what you're doing there, but not necessarily too cautious. Taking a small sample size would be a brilliant way of doing it. So I'm staring at activation model here, and I'm trying to figure out what's the best activation model that Corey has ever seen when it comes to software subscriptions.
Activation model. So basically, it's how do you get someone into your product? That could be the 5 major categories that I've seen are freemium, free trial, paid trial, money back guarantee, and like a consultation. So it could be like a demo or an onboarding call, etc. Personally, my favorite is actually Ahrefs. Just kind of a Ahrefs fanboy. But they do a $7 7-day free trial, paid trial. And so it works for them on a couple different levels, because what they found was that they had a lot of kind of shady, dishonest people who were taking advantage of the free trial. Basically, they would come in and get, export a bunch of data, use everything they wanted to, and then they would just disappear, right? And just ghost them. And basically just kind of stole a bunch of value from Ahrefs without ever paying for it. Now, they also had a lot of honest people who maybe were freelancers, or maybe just kind of like people doing a one-off project, or maybe weren't like doing SEO or content marketing a lot. It was just like a one-time thing. And so they didn't want to subscribe for $99 a month, because they just needed to use it for a week or two, right?
Right.
So they introduced the 7-day $7 trial. They found that $7, $1 a day was just enough to kind of ward off the bad people, the shady people. And it was just enough to extract some value from the customers so that they could see the value and maybe subscribe later. And 7 days is a really short amount of time too. So you get a lot of essentially like turnover, where you see the conversions really quickly, and it doesn't take too long to get someone from someone who's a stranger, to someone who's a customer. So I really like that model.
Right.
But again, that just works for them. It's not that everyone should do that. That's what they found works for them.
Nice. And then I like to mix it up with the other side of the story, which is the worst activation model that you shouldn't do at all. But you see
the worst activation model.
But you see everywhere. Like, this should be something that you see it. Like, it's out there. You see it often. It's a repeated mistake maybe, and it's something that people shouldn't do.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to say that a lot of people who use freemium probably shouldn't be. And especially the people who are using freemium, where someone could use the free account literally forever. Like there would be no limits in using the product for free forever. I think you'll start to see this. Well, we are starting to see this with Evernote. Now they're still a successful business, but they've gone through a lot of tough times. And really a big part of it is because they have too many users who would never upgrade to a paid account, essentially. Right. Yeah. And again, that's not a business. It's a charity at that point, or it's a hobby, right? You can't sustain, especially that amount of users, where they have millions and millions of users who basically would never become paying customers. So I think that a lot of freemium activation models really need to consider, how do we push and nudge someone into a free account, and how do we prevent someone from using a free account forever, right? Because it's just not a healthy. I mean, you can have again, there are other companies like maybe like Canva, for example, who like they have free accounts for students who would never pay anyways. For people who would never pay anyways, who don't have a budget, that's okay, right? But if business owners and enterprises are using Canva for free forever and doing everything they need to, well, you need to pare it down, buddy. Like you're giving too much away for free. Right. So I think more companies can do themselves a favor by just figuring out, how do we create a path to a paid account, and how do we prevent people from taking advantage of the freemium offer.
And you think a lot of people are, let's say, taking just one path to paid accounts? Like you mentioned Canva, and Canva, not a lot of businesses actually, at least the smaller businesses, don't actually go for their Canva work model. What they do is they sell these individual elements within that, which are paid for, like individual stock photos or elements, and that wasn't always the case. So they added that later, but which doesn't overall, let's say, affect or harm your workflow or your product experience. Do you think a lot of people should also look at different ways in which they can actually get the customer to pay instead of just one way?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some room there. Like, for example, at Baremetrics, we sort of have some modular pricing. So you pay a core subscription for the metrics and analytics side of things. And then if you want to add on our Recover product, which is like a full suite of dunning features to help you reduce failed charges and delinquent customers, then you can add that on for an additional subscription. Similarly with our cancellation insights, it's a flat fee of $50 a month. But if you just want to add that on later, you can, and you can remove it later without having to remove everything. So yeah, I mean, in some ways, right, you don't want to you don't want to force people to go all or nothing. You also don't want to just lock yourself into maybe one model. But the other thing you want to do too, though, is you don't want to overcomplicate things.
Mm,
So you don't want to have too many options to where now people don't know what to do, right? Or they're not
right.
sure where they can go. It's really just about, how many different people are we catering to?
Mm,
What's the value that those people are getting out of it? And then how do we monetize it? So
mm,
I would say, I mean, just by kind of default, keep it as simple as possible, because
mm.
simpler the better, the more conversions and the more adoption you'll get.
Right, but I think that's a good way of looking at it. I think in general, like the rule is, it doesn't apply to everyone again, and I think it'll come down to the category and the product, and you have to look at your own customer and what they really are looking for. Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And I think I'm really curious to understand this entire analysis, the generally, let's say, the analytics bit of the entire story, which is, let's say, what Baremetrics does, and how, so I meet people from two different camps. Some people who just like you said, go with guesswork. They do use these tools to sort of, let's say, just because it's out there, and they get educated about it, saying, what, you should be able to understand what your subscriptions are doing and what your, let's say, where people are canceling, what is your cancellation, let's say, in general, and generally understand your own data. But I also see the other side of the story where people don't really spend time in, so they sign up for something like this. You get all this data that's in front of you. It looks nice, it looks pretty, at least with some of the tools, and then they don't spend enough time. So do you think there's so I don't can you dig into that piece, why do you think they don't really look at that kind of data? Because even if they do, they don't really do anything about that within their business.
Mm.
And so what do you see is a lot of people who use these, they're looking at it, they're staring at it. Do you think they're reading it incorrectly, or what is that, or they don't know about their own business? I'm just trying to figure out, is there a right way or wrong way to using or looking at insights?
Yeah, I'll give you an analogy. So for like a lot of email marketing tools, if you drop someone into an email marketing tool, let's say you ran a small business like a coffee shop, for example,
Mm,
and you were collecting, or maybe you're just basically doing a coffee shop, and someone says, "Hey, you should start doing email marketing." So you sign up for something like Mailchimp, and then you say, "Okay, I'm going to send my first email," and then you realize that you don't have any emails to send to because you haven't been collecting any, right?
yeah, yeah,
Well, in that case, it's not going to be any use to you, right,
right.
at all.
Yeah, yeah.
In a similar sense with metrics and analytics and
Mm,
insights, if you get dropped into your tool and you're not looking for anything in specific,
mm,
and you don't really know what to do or where to go, it's going to be no value to you, right? Because you're going to look at MRR, you can look at churn, or lifetime value, and say, okay, cool. Like, what am I supposed to do with this, right?
right.
But let's just say that you have a lot of customers canceling, you're losing revenue, and you sign up for a metrics and analytics product, and you want to figure out, hey, where is my churn actually happening? How many months do people, or like, where in the life cycle of a customer is the churn happening?
Mm,
Well, in that case, we have a cohort analysis, and we have a very detailed segmentation feature where you can basically go in and see who exactly is canceling and where. We also have a cancellation insights feature where now you can see that people are canceling, but we can also understand why they're canceling. And
mm,
in that case, the metrics and analytics become very insightful because, again, you have a question you're looking to answer. So I think a lot of it just comes down to what are you trying to get out of it, and what's your goal with it. If you don't want to get into your metrics at all, then don't sign up for a metrics and analytics product, right?
right.
A lot of people, the people that find the most value out of Baremetrics are the people who like to dig into the numbers, are the people who
Mm,
have specific questions, people who are looking, hey, how can I optimize my business? Where are the things that we should be focusing on? What are the gaps that we can fill, right? And the metrics and analytics will show you all those things, and will teach you where to look for those things as well.
mm,
But if you have nothing to, if you have no questions to answer, or if you have nothing that you're looking for, just like you said, there's going to be no reason to.
right. And then immediately it brings me to that one point, which is, Corey. So I've screwed up my entire SaaS project, SaaS venture, uh, and now I'm like, how do I fix my churn? And then I come to you, and what are you looking at? What questions are you going to ask me? What questions should someone in that position ask themselves? Or what would be the first areas that you would look at? What would you sort of, let's say, dig through to fix the churn?
Yeah. So I would start with, what is your churn rate? So like how many customers are actually leaving? Um, you want to ideally be in the single digits, so below 10%. And then ideally before that, I mean, you want to be in that 2 to 5% as
Mm-hmm.
well. That's a really healthy kind of churn rate. If you're above 10%, let's just say you're kind of like your pants on fire. You need to figure out something pretty quickly, because unless you're just bringing in tons and tons and tons of customers, then it's going to be very hard to sustain a business like that. And so in that way, then you need to understand kind of where do I need to prioritize. Now, I always go and look for why are customers canceling. So we use a product like Cancellation Insights, or if you just want to use your own kind of homegrown type form, or maybe just kind of build something in your own product, you just want to be able to collect some feedback about why your customers are canceling. Because churn, right, is an after product of something else that's going on. It's that your pricing is weird, or it's that it's too expensive. You have missing features. People don't know how to use the product. They never got onboarded. They never started using it. Someone left in the company, now they're switching to something else. A competitor does something very specific that you don't, right? You need to understand what are all those reasons. So in Cancellation Insights, we can show you what the most common reasons are. We can also show you what the most expensive reasons are. And then we can also show you the trends over time, right? And so if, let's just say, the first thing we want to cancel, the most expensive and the most common reason is maybe that there's missing features, right? So now we want to go back to those customers, ask what those features are, and then go build them into the product. And then invite them in, give them a free month, let's just say, for example, and then see if they convert back into paying customers. If so, right, then in the trends, we want to see that that churn is going down, right, and that our efforts are working. And so the other place I would look to as well is just when is the churn happening? Because what you'll find, for example, in that cohort analysis that I just mentioned, is that a lot of the churn usually happens either in the first month, the second month, or the third month, because a lot of a customer's lifetime with you is going to be determined within those first 60, 90 days, or even 30 days.
Right.
Are they getting value out of the product? Are they using it? Is this an integrated part of their workflow? Is this an indispensable tool for them that they need to use, right? And so if you see, for example, that a lot of the churn is happening like right away after 30 days or within the first 30 days, you know that you have a big problem with your activation model, or maybe just with your onboarding, or just with the way that you're communicating what your product does. Maybe there's a misaligned expectation. If it's happening in the 30 to 60-day bucket, then maybe you know that people aren't using it enough, or maybe they're starting to using it, but then they switch to something else, or maybe it just doesn't kind of ever stick with them. Now, if it happens anytime after that, then it's usually something else, right? Usually it's a better product somewhere else, a very specific use case. Maybe it's bad support, technical issues, other things like that. But basically, where the churn happens will also give you really a good indicator of where you should focus your time to.
Boom. So that this covers everything, man. That's like really good. This is like a lot of value there. And I'm sure like I'm going to, I have something like going on right now. And, I've been looking at like a few P2B SaaS ventures in terms of early stage. You just equipped me for my next meeting. So it's just like.
Awesome. Very glad.
It's a lot of value right there. Very nice. This is like a last question I generally ask out to a lot of people.
Sure.
I do two. One's any people you like to give a shout out to in general, who people should look into within the SaaS space. Any people you follow on Twitter, in general, where you get your advice from. Anyone you want to like go with that? Yep.
Yeah. So let's see, specific people, man.
Give me anyone, whoever you look into, read into. Yep.
Yeah, you know what? I sort of stopped reading a ton and listened to. I'll say this actually. Right now, I'm really into a lot of like the Bootstrap SaaS podcasts. And so there's Bootstrap Web, there's Build Your SaaS, Justin Jackson and John Buddha. Bootstrap Web is Jordan Gall and Brian Castle. And you have all sorts of other ones. You have Out of Beta. I'm going to miss a few here. I'm going to be really sad that I did, but you have Out of Beta. We have oh gosh, there's a few other ones. Slow and Steady. There's a bunch of, but I love following those guys building their own SaaS. Trying to make live the dream, be entrepreneurs, build SaaS products for people, and a lot of them are doing a really fantastic job. And so I always follow them. I love following the other entrepreneurs, our customers at Baremetrics. So that's where a lot of the learnings come from too. Where someone's actually experiencing it in real life, and then they're just talking to a friend, or they're on a podcast. They're sharing their experiences. And I think that goes a long way with these little nuggets that you wouldn't find anywhere else.
Second question, I just quick. What gets you going, man? What's your mantra for life? What gets you going?
Yeah, I just I love entrepreneurship and I love helping entrepreneurs. That was a big reason why I wanted to come to Baremetrics was because I just I would love to be a SaaS founder myself one day, and also just love like that community of people. Like I said, I had been following Josh for a long time. I've been following a lot of other SaaS founders for a long time, and so for personally at Baremetrics, I mean, it's just it fulfills me every day just being able to help these people. Truly, it
Mm.
sounds kind of cheesy, but like I wouldn't rather help anyone else. Don't really care for a lot of other types of roles or people, to be honest. I really love SaaS founders. I mean, it gets me excited. It gets me excited for them. I'm invested in their journey. And so that's what gets me going. Yeah.
Perfect. I think that just leaves it on such a good note. Nice to have you here, man. And thanks for all the value that you just like provided. Really, really good to have you here. Nice to see
You
you.
got it, man. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Nice to see you.